Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, October 17th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about a brand new poll from the Associated Press and NORC, who does approval rating polls on the national level, surveying the country after Donald Trump and his administration announced that they brokered a ceasefire in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, between the IDF and Hamas. What we have found here is that there has been a lot of conversation around this ceasefire and its impact on the way in which the American public perceives Donald Trump. Now, obviously, when we take a look at all the, not only international conflict, but domestic policy and domestic situations between Democrats and Republicans, a lot of it does fundamentally come down to how does the American public react to it, and who do they ultimately blame when things go awry. When Donald Trump was president during the COVID-19 pandemic, his response was put on blast, and in reaction, voters voted him out in 2020. In 2024, Joe Biden came into a time where the economy was in a really bad place in 2021, and it never really got to a point where the American public felt very good about the state of the economy, and so they voted out his vice president, who was the nominee for president. And now today we are starting to see that as it comes down to domestic and international policy, it is Donald Trump who serves to be as the point of reference for how not only are either political party doing in terms of the eyes of the American public, but how is the administration doing? How do people view the oath of office that Donald Trump took, and do they respond to it positively or negatively when asked on a broad scale? And so that's where this comes into play. We saw that the ceasefire deal that, the Trump administration has been saying they are championing and saying that this is entirely them, and whether or not, this is something that it can be fleshed out to the point where you can say immediately there will be a change in approval on Donald Trump. The Associated Press has gotten a sample of the American public to see, has this ceasefire deal actually changed your mind about the president of the United States? Now, you might be not super shocked to know that earlier on in, our coverage of Donald Trump, his approval rating hadn't really ever been that popular since March of 2025. January, February, March, okay, the numbers were okay. They were sort of in that honeymoon period, but now they've reached real lows, and they haven't gotten much better. The Associated Press makes this question, and they ask the point, how has the approval rating shifted? Because the Trump administration, I think, was expecting that after the announcement of the ceasefire in Gaza, that there would be an immediate bump in terms of the way the American public viewed him, that they would see him as this, peace broker who deserves, whatever award Donald Trump decides he wants on any which day. And so the Associated Press has these numbers. We can go through them and see the way in which the American public views Donald Trump. But the point is that 61% of the country disapproves of the job that Donald Trump is doing. Just 37% approve of how he's doing in the country. And when it comes down to this issue, the conflict, this is the way the poll phrases it, the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians on handling this conflict, as the Associated Press writes it, Donald Trump has a disapproval rating of just 49%, in contrast with the 61% nationwide. But on other domestic issues, and of course international ones, Donald Trump is unpopular. On immigration, the economy, healthcare, his approval rating is abysmal. And even on this conflict that Donald Trump, says he brokered the deal on, that he is, peacemaker in the Middle East, just 47% of the American public approves of the job that Donald Trump is doing. But is that translating to anything substantive? The answer is no. His numbers were in a better position between August 20th and September 10th. The approval rating there difference was only about 8%, but then it grew. And it grew tremendously to a point where today it's even worse than where it was prior to the announcement of this ceasefire. And I think that speaks to a general trend line that we've been seeing about the president of the United States, that voters are not as easily persuaded as Donald Trump might think on the issues, that he believes he does well on. When it comes down to, immigration policy is a great example. Donald Trump believes, because he won the last presidential election, that mass deportations are a staple of the American public that they want to see continued through the end of his second term. But he could not be further from the truth. When Donald Trump championed, quote-unquote championed, and again, this is the way that they have phrased it, immigration policy and won the last election, yes, he did. campaign on a lot of the things that he was going to do. But oftentimes, what we know is that the American public doesn't always believe the candidates are going to go to the extremes that they say they will. A lot of the times people chalk it up, and they did it for Trump in 2016, they did it again in 2024, that this was just appealing to his base, and that once he's president of the United States, he'll change his tune and he'll act more presidential, and once he's advised by some of the nation's top minds on issues that matter the most to the American public, yada, 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 all of these different things that evidently were not true. And taking a look at the way the American public is responding, yes, nearly the majority of the nation, not the majority, but nearly the majority of the nation voted for Donald Trump in the last election. But what we forget, and I think the administration forgets, maybe we don't because we cover this all the time, is that that is not a mandate excessive enough that allows you this agency to try and do every single thing that you want, defying constitutional order, defying lower courts, defying, in some cases, the United States Supreme Court, doing what you will because you have the ability to do so. And as the executive branch grows in power, it doesn't necessarily make it better that the administration is taking advantage of this growth in power. And voters see it. They see all of these different things, the way they view Donald Trump on every single issue is underwater. On immigration, it's down. Deportation, it's down. On trade, it's down. Jobs in the economy, inflation, cost of living, healthcare. On every single key issue that he started out above water on when he started in office, which is actually a change from 2017 when he was elected in 16, started in January 2017. On almost all these issues, his approval rating was still in the negative. He had a honeymoon period for about a week, and then from then onward, his numbers were in the gutter. And now, they're arguably even worse than where he was 8 years ago. Voters, I think, in the last cycle, gave Donald Trump a chance because they believed he was the radical change they wanted to see on the national stage. But it seems as if this change has gotten far too radical in a way that even something like a ceasefire agreement that Donald Trump believes was going to be and is going to be this massive reason why voters will now change their allegiance to support Donald Trump, change their allegiance to support Republicans. That's simply never how it was going to go. Because the American public is right to care about multiple issues at once. But to the degree that this was going to somehow single-handedly save Donald Trump's administration, the answer is no. And also, too, the relationship between, Donald Trump and the polling numbers that we've seen historically have never been great, right? He's never been an approved of or adored president. And even then, he's still come close to victory and won elections. 2 out of the 3 that he was the Republican nominee for president for, Donald Trump won those elections. So to some point, you have to say the approval rating does not mean everything. But what we've known historically is that it is the approval rating of Donald Trump that likely drives midterm elections. In 2018, that result went to the Democrats because Republicans were unpopular, because Donald Trump was unpopular. In 2022, Republicans won back control of the House of Representatives because Democrats were unpopular, because Biden was unpopular. In 2014, Republicans gained seats in the House of Representatives because Democrats were unpopular, because Obama was unpopular. And in 2010 and in 2006, and it goes on and on and on. And that is the case on the national stage of how these elections work, of how midterm elections work. And thinking about where we are today with Donald Trump's approval rating in such a low and such a negative place, the American public is angry. They're tired of this administration and feel not represented, and feel as if this administration is going too far on a number of different issue points that they care about deeply. And even though Donald Trump might have this victory, his triumph, as Time Magazine put it, it isn't all of a sudden going to erase the minds of voters who have already made an opinion of Donald Trump that in some cases has been prevailing for the past decade since he came down the escalator and announced his bid for the presidency of the United States of America. And thinking about what we've seen is that Donald Trump continues to be underwater by every single metric. And should this trend line continue, there's a reason we are confident Democrats win almost every election this November of 2025. There's a reason we believe that come November of 2026, barring a voting rights amendment collapse, even with all this redrawing of the maps here, Democrats are still likely going to win back House control because even though the generic ballot may not be as lopsided in favor of Democrats as it was in 2018, it's still pretty good, especially relative to the last election. And so Donald Trump's approval rating, still in the negative. Voters are angry, and even though he might have momentary victories that his administration celebrates left and right, voters from the left, right, and center seem to agree. They disapprove of the job that Donald Trump is doing, and they're unhappy with the current state of this second Trump administration and will likely vote accordingly. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.